There's a peculiar silence that follows when you choose not to respond. Not a silence from the outside world, because that rarely quiets anymore. The pings, the red dots, the endless blinking lights, they don't stop. The silence is internal. It creeps in slowly like a fog, a kind of disorientation, a discomfort, an itch that can't be scratched. In a world that rewards visibility, what happens when you make yourself invisible? We live in the age of availability. Constant, unrelenting, soul-consuming availability. You're expected to answer, to be reachable, to be seen, to be known. You're measured by your presence online, at work, in relationships. The person who replies fastest is the most reliable. The one who shows up constantly is the most loyal. The one who disappears, the one who takes space, suspicious, problematic, maybe even dangerous. But no one stops to ask, why? Why does unavailability trigger such discomfort in us and in others? Why does being unreachable feel like we're breaking some sacred social contract? Why does silence feel like violence? Look at the architecture of our modern existence. You wake up, and before your feet hit the floor, a screen demands your attention. Messages await you, not just texts, but expectations, obligations, tiny emotional contracts you never agreed to, but feel guilty for not fulfilling. Work expects your weekend. Friends expect your instant replies. Strangers expect your opinions. Algorithms expect your loyalty. There is no sacred pause, no ritual of withdrawal, no socially accepted way to say, I am not available right now, not because I don't care, but because I need to care for something deeper. Something hidden. And here's the paradox. The more available we are, the less we actually exist. When you are always seen, you are rarely known. When you are constantly reacting, you are never reflecting. You become a mirror for other people's needs until one day, you don't recognize your own reflection anymore. Carl Jung warned of this. He spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to fit into the world. A mask crafted from expectations, shaped by our desire to be liked, accepted, safe. But underneath the persona lives something else. The shadow, the repressed, the unspoken, the truths we've buried beneath obligation. The more you feed the persona, the more the shadow grows restless. But to meet the shadow, Jung said, you must withdraw. You must become unavailable to the crowd, to the noise, even to the parts of yourself that crave approval. Because it's only in that quiet confrontation that the real transformation begins. And this is where it gets terrifying. When you stop being available, when you stop answering, posting, performing, what rushes in is not peace, not at first. What rushes in is fear, the fear of missing out, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of facing the void that your availability was helping you avoid. Because availability, at its core, isn't always connection. Sometimes it's a form of escape, a way to avoid solitude, a way to avoid yourself. Consider this: when you don't respond to a message, what story immediately forms in your head? They'll think I'm rude. They'll think I'm unreliable. They'll forget about me. And in that moment, you're not responding to the person. You're responding to the narrative, a script written by insecurity, one that tells you, if I disappear, I'll become nothing. But what if the opposite is true? What if disappearing is the only way to truly appear for the first time? What if stepping back is not an absence, but a return, not a rejection of others, but a reclamation of self? This isn't a call for isolation. It's not about cutting off the world. It's about recognizing that constant connection doesn't equal depth, that endless communication doesn't equal intimacy, that being seen doesn't mean you're being understood. Maybe, just maybe, true connection begins where availability ends. And so, we begin with this uncomfortable truth. The modern world has trained us to fear our own absence, but perhaps that fear is a signal that something buried deep within you is ready to be uncovered. So the question is no longer, what happens when you stop being available? The question is, what's waiting for you when you do? The journey to that answer starts now. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But who is that really? The version of yourself you bring to work, the face you show to friends, the curated personality online. These are fragments, performances. Jung called them the persona, the social masks we create to survive the expectations of the world. The persona is not inherently false. It serves a purpose. It protects us. It allows us to function. It's how we navigate families, institutions, lovers, followers. But like any mask, the danger isn't in wearing it. The danger is forgetting you ever put it on. And most of us have. From childhood, we are taught what to display and what to hide. We learn what earns praise and what invites punishment. And slowly, without realizing it, we become experts at performance. The agreeable student, the confident professional, the funny friend, the strong sibling, the helpful partner. But behind the persona, something else waits. Something Jung called the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we've rejected, buried, or denied. The shadow is not evil. It's simply unseen. It contains our anger, our envy, our lust, our fear, but also our creativity, our intuition, our forgotten dreams. It is the full spectrum of human experience, compacted into a part of ourselves we're taught not to look at too closely. The tragedy? The more we ignore the shadow, the more power it gains. It leaks out in strange behaviors, in projections, in irrational reactions, in self-sabotage. We think we're just tired or unlucky or not ourselves, but in truth, we're haunted by everything we've exiled within. So how do we reclaim it? Jung believed that true psychological growth, what he called individuation, only begins when we start integrating the persona and the shadow. When we become whole, not by erasing parts of ourselves, but by reconciling with them, by making the unconscious conscious. But this isn't a gentle process. It isn't comfortable. It is, in fact, a kind of death, a symbolic unraveling of who we thought we were. And here is where withdrawal becomes sacred, because you cannot confront your shadow in the middle of performance. You cannot hear the whispers of your true self while you're still acting out the expectations of others. The stage must be abandoned, the spotlight turned off. You must become unavailable, not just socially, but symbolically, emotionally, spiritually. Withdrawal is not laziness. It is not failure. It is not weakness. It is a rite of passage throughout history. We see this pattern again and again in myth, in religion, in literature. The archetype of the hermit who leaves the village and walks into the wilderness. The prophet who isolates in a cave before returning with vision. The exile who is cast out and finds strength in solitude. These figures aren't running away from the world. They're confronting something deeper than the world themselves. Moses climbs the mountain. Buddha sits beneath the Bodhi tree. Jesus fasts in the desert. Jung, himself, retreated after his split with Freud and began what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of dreams, visions, and breakdowns, a descent into what he feared might be madness, but ultimately became the foundation of his genius. Each of them withdrew, each of them disappeared, each of them reemerged, transformed. But we fear withdrawal because we equate it with loneliness. We fear being misunderstood, mischaracterized, abandoned. In a world that worships productivity, being unavailable is almost heretical. It breaks the social code. It challenges the machinery. It says, I am no longer playing by the rules you gave me. And this is precisely what makes it powerful. Because once you step away from the world, you begin to see the world for what it is, not what it told you it was. You begin to recognize which parts of your identity were given to you and which parts were stolen. You begin to distinguish between your voice and the voices in your head that never belonged to you in the first place. This is not an easy journey. Jung warned that those who look inside themselves risk confronting chaos, that the unconscious is not a garden, it is a jungle, and yet, within that chaos lies the blueprint of who we were meant to be. So what does this mean for you? It means that becoming unavailable is more than a lifestyle choice. It's a psychological rebellion, a decision to stop being who the world expects you to be and start discovering who you truly are. It means recognizing that behind your availability may be a deeper avoidance of shadow, of silence, of self. And in that sense, withdrawal is not retreat, it's resurrection. To withdraw is to say, I will not answer right now, not because I don't care, but because I care too much to keep living halfway. I will not perform anymore, not because I'm angry, but because I'm exhausted from living a lie. I will not be available not because I'm hiding, but because I'm finally ready to be found. So if you feel the pull to step away, listen. It is not weakness. It is not selfishness. It is the beginning of the only journey that ever mattered. The journey inward, toward the place where the persona dissolves and the shadow is waiting. Not to destroy you, but to make you whole. Scarcity is not just a matter of supply and demand. It's a matter of perception. Imagine you're standing in a crowded room and you spot someone you admire, someone whose presence always seems to attract attention, whose words carry weight. There's something magnetic about them, something that draws you in. But here's the catch: they're not talking to anyone. They're standing alone, observing, perhaps even distant. They're not chasing anyone. They're simply there, not easily accessible. What happens next? Suddenly, that person becomes infinitely more interesting. The distance, both physical and emotional, does something to our minds. It elevates their value. Their presence becomes rare, and in that rarity, we sense something primal, desire, not necessarily sexual attraction, but something deeper, an impulse to engage with what feels elusive. The more we perceive someone as distant, the more we crave them. This is the psychology of scarcity. At the core of human nature is a deep-seated bias toward rarity. This is not a modern construct, it's embedded in our evolutionary DNA. From the moment our ancestors had to hunt for food, value was tied to what was hard to get. If something was scarce, it was valuable. The rarest fruits were often the most nutritious. The most elusive prey was often the most dangerous, and therefore, the most rewarding to catch. Today, this principle hasn't vanished. In fact, it's more potent than ever, but it plays out in more subtle ways. It's not about physical scarcity, it's about emotional and social scarcity. Consider how we behave with someone who's always available. Their time is constant, predictable. They answer every call, reply to every message, are always present. We may respect them, but do we desire them? Do we truly value them? The answer, in most cases, is no. Availability creates an illusion of abundance, and abundance dilutes value. When something is always there, it loses its edge. It's no longer precious, no longer rare. Now, imagine someone who sets boundaries, someone who occasionally says no, who doesn't rush to fill every silence, every empty space. They disappear for a few days, or they don't pick up the phone immediately. Their availability fluctuates, and the moment it does, something shifts. We begin to wonder. We begin to feel a desire to reach out, to understand why they aren't responding. They become the object of curiosity, of attention. This isn't manipulative behavior. This is human nature. The scarcity of their attention forces us to recalibrate. We respect them more because they've set a line. And respect, in this context, is often the precursor to desire. This same principle holds in the world of marketing and consumer behavior. Think about limited edition releases, exclusive events, or even the act of waiting in line for a product. The less access there is to something, the more its perceived value skyrockets. We're willing to pay more, to invest more emotional energy, to chase that object of scarcity. The more we can't have something, the more our brains signal to us that we must have it. This is the same mechanism that works when people apply the principle of mystery to their relationships. The more we hold back, the more we cultivate intrigue. When we are too available, we reveal all of ourselves too quickly. There's nothing left to discover. The thrill of the chase dies, and what remains is a predictable narrative. But when you are scarce, when your energy, your presence, your time is precious, people begin to see you in a different light. They respect your time, and through that respect, they begin to engage with you more thoughtfully, more intentionally. The deeper question, however, is not just why scarcity creates value in others, but why we fear scarcity in the first place. Why does the thought of becoming unavailable feel so unsettling? At the heart of it, this fear of scarcity is rooted in an ancient human need for validation. For most of us, our value has been conditioned by how much we are needed by others. We are told that the more we give, the more we're loved, that the more we're available, the more successful we become. This is the currency we've been trained to value: attention, approval, presence. The more of it we have, the more we feel worthy. So when we withdraw, when we make ourselves scarce, we threaten that very narrative. we face the discomfort of questioning our worth. Are we still valuable if we aren't constantly answering every message? Are we still loved if we're not always there? And this is the crux of the issue. Our fear of scarcity reveals how deeply entwined we are with external validation. We rely on the feedback loop of others' responses to define who we are. Without that constant feedback, we're left to face a terrifying possibility. Our value is not intrinsic. It is not based on who we are, but on how much we are seen. This is not only exhausting, it's unsustainable. The need for constant availability strips us of our authenticity. We are no longer acting from our own desires, but from the fear of not being desired. But this is where the true cost lies. In sacrificing our own boundaries for the sake of keeping others close, we lose something irreplaceable ourselves. We become nothing more than a reflection of the desires and expectations of others. We are no longer the person who makes decisions from a place of inner clarity, but the person who only acts to meet external demands. Yet, when we step back, when we choose to be unavailable, we regain our power. The more we learn to say no, the more we learn what truly matters to us. Scarcity isn't just about forcing others to value you, it's about forcing yourself to value your own time, your own presence, your own boundaries. When you step into the power of your own unavailability, you begin to answer a question far more profound than simply, why do they want me? You begin to ask, why do I want to give myself away? In the space created by scarcity, something powerful emerges: self-respect. The ability to say no, not out of fear or selfishness, but out of clarity, out of understanding that you, too, are valuable not because of your availability, but because of the uniqueness of your presence. Scarcity is not just a psychological trick we play on others. It's a statement we make to ourselves, and in a world that never stops demanding, it's a statement that, for once, says, I am enough as I am. I do not need to prove my worth by constantly being available. The truth is, you're never more valuable than when you're no longer desperately trying to be seen. There is a quiet power in withdrawal, one that has echoed through history and reverberated across time. It is a power that only a few have truly understood: the power of stepping away from the world to confront something deeper. The world, as we know it, is built on connection. We are social creatures. We live in an intricate web of relationships, responsibilities, expectations, and roles. We perform, we give, we conform. But the rebel, the true seeker, knows something different. To find the self, one must first retreat. To discover the truth, one must first step back from the noise. This is the story of those who chose to withdraw from society and, in doing so, rewrote the course of history. These figures didn't merely disappear, they transformed themselves. And by doing so, they transformed the world. Let us begin with Carl Jung. Jung's split with Sigmund Freud was one of the most seismic ruptures in the history of psychology. The two men, once close collaborators, grew apart as their ideas diverged. Freud focused on sexuality and the unconscious, believed in a certain determinism to human behavior. Jung, however, saw the psyche as a vast, creative terrain filled with archetypes and unconscious patterns, something far more expansive and spiritual. Their break was not just intellectual, it was personal. In the aftermath, Jung withdrew from the world. He retreated to his private home in Balingen, Switzerland, where he would engage in what he called his confrontation with the unconscious alone. With only his thoughts and dreams as company, Jung entered a period of deep introspection. He would record his dreams, create drawings, and engage in symbolic practices. In a sense, he built a psychological laboratory in the solitude of his own mind. It was here, in this isolation, that Jung uncovered the full depth of his theories: the persona, the shadow, the archetypes, and the process of individuation. Without this time alone, away from the distractions of the world, Jung might never have developed the ideas that would later revolutionize not just psychology, but our understanding of the human condition. Jung's withdrawal was not a retreat into passivity. It was an active engagement with his own inner chaos. He died a transformed man, having faced and integrated the darkest parts of his psyche, and in doing so, helped countless others confront their own. Next, let us look at Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher whose withdrawal from the world would birth some of the most powerful ideas of modern philosophy, Nietzsche, disillusioned with the constraints of academia, chose to leave the world of institutions behind. He isolated himself in the Swiss Alps, far from the noise of the academic world, and began to write what would become his magnum opus. Thus spoke Zarathustra. It was here, in this solitude, that Nietzsche's philosophy took shape, and exploration of the Übermensch, the Overman, the rejection of conventional morality, and the radical assertion of individual will. But Nietzsche didn't just write in isolation, he lived it. He rejected the norms of society, the comfort of accepted beliefs, and retreated into a space where only his deepest thoughts could shape his worldview. The resulting work was not just intellectual, it was personal. Nietzsche's ideas challenged everything. They questioned the very foundation of society, religion, and morality. He posited that only by confronting the deepest existential questions, alone and unencumbered by societal expectations, could one achieve true greatness. Nietzsche's withdrawal gave birth to the idea that freedom could only be found through solitude, a radical concept that would shape existentialism, modern philosophy, and beyond. In his isolation, Nietzsche became a voice for those who dared to reject convention and create their own path. Now, consider Diogenes of Sinope, the ancient Greek philosopher whose withdrawal from society wasn't just a retreat, but an outright rejection of the social order. Diogenes was a cynic both philosophically and practically. He lived in a barrel or a large jar on the streets of Athens, choosing to exist without the trappings of wealth, power, or even basic social conventions. Diogenes took the idea of withdrawal to an extreme, but his philosophy was clear. True freedom comes from rejecting the artificial constraints of society. He lived without fear of judgment, without concern for status or reputation. He would mock the social elite, using his unconventional lifestyle as a tool to expose the absurdity of societal norms. His famous act of wandering into the daylight during the day with a lantern, claiming to be looking for an honest man, was a statement against the falseness of those around him. Diogenes wasn't merely avoiding the world, he was showing the world how empty its pretensions were. His withdrawal was a radical act of freedom, a challenge to the very idea that society's expectations should define the individual. His life was a testament to the power of rejecting the world in order to live authentically, and his influence, though often mocked in his time, would go on to inspire generations of thinkers who sought to break free from the chains of convention. Next, we turn to Buddha, perhaps the most famous historical figure to take withdrawal to a spiritual extreme. Born Siddhartha Gautama in a royal palace, Buddha lived a life of luxury, shielded from the suffering of the world. But upon encountering sickness, old age, and death, he realized the impermanence of all things. He left his kingdom, his family, and everything he knew behind, retreating into the wilderness to meditate and search for the truth of human suffering. It was in solitude, beneath the Bodhi tree, that Siddhartha attained enlightenment. He confronted the chaos of the world, not by fighting against it, but by withdrawing into stillness and inner clarity. His withdrawal was not to escape suffering, but to understand it deeply, to find the path out of the endless cycle of desire and pain. In doing so, Buddha created a spiritual framework that continues to shape millions of lives today. His journey of withdrawal, one of deep contemplation and inner transformation, led to the creation of a philosophy that transcended personal liberation to encompass the liberation of all sentient beings. Each of these figures, Jung, Nietzsche, Diogenes, Buddha, shows us something crucial. Withdrawal is not a retreat into nothingness, but a return to something far deeper. It is not an escape from society, but a confrontation with the self. They face the chaos of the mind, the emptiness of the world, and the pain of isolation, but they emerge from it transformed. Their journeys remind us that sometimes, to change the world, we must first withdraw from it. To truly create, to truly become, we must often endure the loneliness, the chaos, and the death of our former selves. Because, in the end, withdrawal is not about leaving the world behind, it's about finding the power to change it. And that change begins from within. There is a silence that comes when you stop answering. It's not just the silence of the world, it's the silence of your own mind. And it is deafening. When you become unavailable, The world may shift around you, but the real change happens within. At first, the withdrawal is liberating. You breathe. You have space to think, to feel, to be. But then, something unexpected begins to happen. The longer you remain unavailable, the louder the silence grows. And in that silence, you are forced to confront something that, until now, you've managed to avoid. The shadow. Carl Jung, the man who unlocked the deepest recesses of the human psyche, knew this moment all too well. He spoke of the shadow as that hidden part of the self, the aspects of our personality we repress or deny. These are the parts of us that don't fit into the social mask we've created. They are the traits, desires, and impulses that contradict our persona, the public face we present to the world. They are the parts of ourselves that we push down, hoping they'll stay out of sight, out of mind. But the truth is, the shadow is never truly hidden. It waits, patient and persistent, until the moment arrives when we can no longer run from it. And that moment comes when you become unavailable, when you stop filling your time with constant noise and external validation, when you stop answering every call and every message. The mask you've worn for so long starts to loosen. The persona begins to crack, and from behind that mask, the shadow begins to emerge. It's a terrifying thing to confront. The shadow is not just made of things we are ashamed of, but of all the parts of us we have rejected: our anger, our greed, our insecurities, our desires, our rage, our fear. The shadow is filled with the fragments of ourselves that we never allowed to exist. It is a mirror of everything we have buried beneath the surface, everything we've been too afraid to acknowledge. For many, this is the moment of ego death, the realization that the identity we've clung to, the roles we've performed, were never truly who we were. The ego, which defines our sense of self, is built on external validation. It thrives on approval, on the constant feedback loop of society's expectations. When you step away from that, when you begin to break the cycle of constant availability, the ego starts to unravel, and with it, your sense of who you thought you were begins to dissolve. This process, this unraveling of the self, can be terrifying. It feels like dying, but this, Jung would argue, is necessary for true psychological growth. To face the shadow is to confront the unconscious parts of ourselves we've repressed. And when we do, we experience a kind of symbolic death, a death of the old self, the self we thought we were, the self we were told we should be. And in that death, there's rebirth. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming the true whole self, can only happen when we face the shadow, when we stop running from our deepest fears, desires, and vulnerabilities. We begin to integrate those aspects of ourselves. We stop living in a fragmented state, and instead, we move toward wholeness. But this is not a process for the faint of heart. It requires courage. It requires sitting with discomfort, with the knowledge that to grow, to transform, you must first face the very things you've feared most about yourself. When you begin to face your shadow, the inner war begins. The fear rises, fear of what you'll find within, fear of the anger you've suppressed, the shame you've buried, the guilt you've never resolved. But in that confrontation, something begins to shift. The shadow no longer holds power over you, because you are no longer trying to deny it. You no longer need to keep it hidden. And when you stop hiding it, you begin to reclaim your true power. But the fear of confronting the shadow is not just about fear of what we might find. It's about fear of what that confrontation might mean. If we confront the parts of ourselves we've buried, we might have to change. And change is a terrifying prospect. We fear that the self we've built, the identity we've crafted, will be obliterated. We fear that we will cease to be who we thought we were. We fear that we will become unrecognizable to ourselves and others. Yet, this is the paradox of the shadow. The very parts of us that we fear, that we have pushed away, are often the very things that can liberate us. The darkness, the chaos, the anger, the grief, they hold the keys to a deeper understanding of ourselves. And by embracing them, by allowing ourselves to be fully human, we free ourselves from the constraints of the persona. Take, for example, the moment of artistic creation. Many great artists, musicians, and writers have spoken of the overwhelming urge to create something profound when they are in a state of deep emotional turmoil. This is not a coincidence. The shadow is where creativity is born. When we allow ourselves to feel deeply, when we stop denying the uncomfortable emotions within us, we tap into a well of power and creativity we never knew existed. But creativity, like transformation, comes with its own set of risks. It is born from chaos. It is born from the willingness to face the parts of ourselves that frighten us the most. To face the shadow is to invite that chaos into our lives, to welcome the unknown, the uncomfortable, the vulnerable. It is to risk not only our identity, but the very structure of our lives. But this is the path to freedom. To become unavailable is not just to step away from the world, it is to step toward the self. It is to embrace the parts of us that we have denied for so long. It is to face the darkness not with fear, but with acceptance. And through that acceptance, we find the strength to transform, to transcend, to become the person we were always meant to be. This is the war within. It is the battle between the comfort of the known and the liberation of the unknown. It is the struggle between the ego and the shadow. And it is a battle that every person must face if they wish to evolve. To meet the shadow is to meet your own potential, the potential to be whole, to be authentic, to be free. The question remains, are you willing to face the parts of yourself you've buried under your availability? Are you ready to confront the darkness within and emerge transformed? Because, in the end, it is only by facing the shadow that we can truly step into the light. There's a strange feeling that arises when you stop being available. At first, it's a quiet absence. You might not even notice it yourself after all. You've only stepped away to find yourself, to face your shadow. But as the days pass, you begin to realize that others are starting to notice. The text messages slow down. The calls come less frequently. The invitations dry up. And then, the questions start. Where have you been? Is everything okay? At first, they are polite, almost concerned. But then, something shifts. The concern fades, and confusion sets in. People can no longer predict your movements, your actions, your presence. Your identity, once neatly packaged for the world, becomes less predictable. You've stopped fulfilling the role they've come to expect of you. You're no longer the constant figure they could count on, the one who answered texts immediately, the one who showed up at every event, who was always there to validate their reality. Instead, you've become something else, a mirror, rather than a mask. And this is where the real tension begins. When you stop being available, when you stop playing the role people have assigned to you, it causes a ripple in the dynamics of your relationships. You've disrupted the balance. You've stepped off the hamster wheel that everyone else seems to be on. And now, they're not sure what to make of you. At a deep, subconscious level, your absence is threatening to others. It's a challenge to their stability. People often rely on your availability to feel secure in their own lives. Your responses, your presence, act as markers, reassuring them that they are important, that they matter. But when you pull away, something unsettling happens. You stop being the stable constant in their life, and they must confront a deeper truth. They were leaning on you more than they realized. Jung's concept of the persona becomes crucial here. The persona is the social mask we wear to fit in, to meet the expectations of others. It's how we shape ourselves to be acceptable in society, how we conform to the roles others expect us to play. But when you step away, you tear off the mask. And when you tear off the mask, it reveals something uncomfortably real, both for you and for the people around you. For many, this change is unsettling. People don't like unpredictability. They want to know what to expect from you, how to define you, how to place you in a box. But by becoming unavailable, you become fluid. You become a mystery, and in doing so, you stop fulfilling their expectations. Some people, when confronted with this change, will resist. They will try to pull you back into your old role. They'll send more messages, show up at your door, try to create reasons to get your attention. Their fear is not just about losing contact with you, it's about losing the comfort they derived from having you in their life, being able to predict and rely on your behavior. But then, there are others who will be magnetized. There will be those who are drawn to your absence, curious about what you've discovered in your silence, eager to understand the new person you're becoming. These individuals may be inspired by your boundary setting. They may see your withdrawal not as a rejection, but as a declaration of strength. Your absence becomes a space of transformation. a space they are willing to enter to explore what it means to be free from constant availability. These reactions are not just theoretical, they are happening all around us, especially in the age of digital connectivity. In the world of social media, for example, where every moment is shared and every opinion is broadcasted, withdrawal can be an act of defiance, an act that challenges the norms of constant online presence. A person who takes a break from social media, who goes on a digital detox, doesn't just step away from technology, they step away from the role they've played in the eyes of others. They stop being the person whose life is on display 24/7. They stop being the person who lives for the approval of their followers, and in doing so, they may trigger feelings of discomfort, confusion, or even resentment in others. The same applies to setting boundaries in our personal relationships. When you stop being constantly available to answer every question, offer advice, or show up at every event, you shift the dynamic. People who have grown accustomed to your availability may feel abandoned or neglected. Some may respond with anger or frustration. After all, you were a steady presence in their life, and now they must adjust to a new reality without you in the same way. But for those who respect your boundaries, your withdrawal becomes a source of empowerment. It shows them that it's possible to live without constantly seeking validation from others. It reveals that there is strength in silence, in solitude, and in self-definition. Your absence can become a lesson to them that we do not exist to be available to others at the expense of ourselves. The evolution of relationships, then, is one of the most profound consequences of stepping away. Some relationships will collapse, unable to survive the rupture caused by your absence. These are the relationships based on convenience, based on the unspoken agreement that you will always be there, that your identity is tied to your availability. When that dynamic shifts, the foundation crumbles. These relationships may not have been as deep or meaningful as they seemed, and when you stop showing up as expected, they fall apart. But others will evolve. They will adapt. They will respect your new boundaries and meet you on new terms. These relationships, based on mutual understanding and respect for autonomy, will deepen. Your absence, rather than causing friction, will allow both you and the other person to grow. You'll find that those who truly care about you will adjust, will meet you in the silence, and will not expect you to constantly validate their sense of stability. The truth is, withdrawal is not just an internal act, it is a quiet revolution that ripples outward. It challenges the very way we interact with each other. It forces us to confront the ways in which we rely on the presence and availability of others to feel secure, and in doing so, it invites us to rethink the nature of relationships and connection. When you stop being available, you start to show people something they may not have expected, that your worth is not tied to your availability, that your identity is not something they can define, and that the dynamics of your relationships are not fixed. In this small rebellion, you open the door to something more authentic, something deeper, something more free. And as you return transformed, others may see you differently. They may see you as a reflection of their own potential, a reminder that true freedom begins when we stop seeking approval and start seeking the truth within. Absence, in our modern world, is often perceived as a form of lack. When we step away from the constant flow of communication, the social interactions, and the expectations of those around us, there's a tendency to see that withdrawal as a void of space that has been left empty. But what if this absence, this space, is not something to fear, but something to embrace? What if the greatest power doesn't lie in how much we give or how much we engage, but in how consciously we choose to step back, to be unavailable? This is the crucial shift we need to make in our understanding of withdrawal. Absence is not weakness, it is strength. Silence is not the absence of communication, it is communication in its purest, most intentional form in the Taoist tradition. This idea is embodied in the concept of Wu Wei, or non-action. But non-action is not about inaction, it is the act of doing nothing. In order to allow things to flow naturally, it's the ability to step back, to withdraw from the chaos, and to let the world reorganize itself around you. There is power in this stillness, power in this absence. Taoism teaches us that the world is constantly in flux, that everything is interconnected, and that sometimes The most powerful thing you can do is to stop trying to control it all, to step away, to allow space to form between you and the external world. Is not an act of apathy, it is a deliberate act of presence. It's a conscious withdrawal that creates room for reflection, for deeper engagement, and for authenticity. In a similar vein, the minimalist philosophy teaches us that less is more. It challenges the notion that our worth is determined by how much we accumulate, how much we give, or how much we do. Instead, minimalism emphasizes the value of presence, of simplicity, and of clarity. By reducing the clutter in our lives, by pulling back from unnecessary distractions, we can create space for what truly matters. The same principle applies when we withdraw from the endless demands of others. We make room for ourselves, for our thoughts, for our personal growth. This idea of conscious absence is where all of the threads we've discussed so far begin to come together. Scarcity increases value. Boundaries create respect. The shadow, once confronted, integrates into the self, and individuation, the journey to becoming a fully realized person, requires us to step away from the roles and expectations others have imposed upon us. Each of these elements feeds into the notion that, in our withdrawal, we don't lose power, we gain it. Think about it. When you stop being constantly available, you stop playing by the rules set by others. You stop seeking external validation, and instead, you begin to operate from a place of internal clarity and strength. This shift doesn't make you a recluse or an apathetic figure. On the contrary, it makes you more present, more intentional, and more authentic. The people around you begin to see you differently, not as someone who is always there to fulfill their needs, but as someone who has their own sense of self, their own boundaries, and their own purpose. You become more magnetic, not because you are constantly available, but because you have consciously chosen to define yourself outside of the expectations of others. The power of conscious absence is the ability to remove yourself from the noise, to resist the pull of constant demand, and to cultivate a presence that is both rare and deeply meaningful. It's about understanding that your worth is not defined by how much you give, but by how much you choose to keep for yourself. It's about realizing that you don't need to be everywhere, do everything, or be available at all times in order to be valued. In fact, the more you consciously withdraw, the more your presence will be felt. The less you give, the more others will appreciate what you do offer. This is the paradox. True power lies not in what you give, but in what you hold back. When you stop being available, the world doesn't forget you, it reconfigures around you. The people who truly care will respect your space. They will honor your boundaries, not because you are unavailable, but because they understand that your withdrawal is an act of self-preservation, of personal growth, and of transformation. Your absence allows them to see you as more than just a resource to be consumed. It allows them to see you as a person with your own needs, your own soul, your own journey. The world doesn't stop when you step back. It finds new ways to accommodate you. It finds new ways to interact with your presence. This is the shift we often fail to see. We think that if we are not constantly available, if we are not constantly giving of ourselves, we will be forgotten, cast aside. But the truth is, the world will adapt. It will recalibrate. The people who need you will find new ways to connect with you, ways that are more authentic, more meaningful, and more aligned with who you are, not who you were expected to be. This is the final revelation. Your greatest power lies in your absence. It lies in your ability to withdraw consciously, to let the world change its relationship to you, and to trust that in doing so, you will find deeper connections, more profound meaning, and greater personal growth. The world doesn't need your constant presence to acknowledge your worth. In fact, it's often when you step back, when you let go of the need to be constantly available, that you allow the world to see you more clearly. You stop being a reflection of their needs and start being a reflection of your own truth. So, the next time you feel the urge to give more, to respond faster, to be more available, pause, step back, embrace the power of conscious absence. It is not a loss, but a gain. It is not a retreat, but a strategic withdrawal. And in that silence, in that space, you will find a deeper form of presence, one that is rooted in your truest self. The world may not always understand, but it will always adapt, and in the end, It will recognize the strength that comes from choosing to step away. We return to the world we began with, chaotic, buzzing, and unrelenting. The notifications continue to pop up on screens, the voices blend into an endless hum, and the faces, though close, seem miles away. The world is still caught in the frenzy, a whirlwind of connectivity and expectation. Yet, as we stand at the edge of this vast, digital storm, something has changed. You've listened, you've reflected, and perhaps, in these quiet moments, you've seen something deeper beneath the surface, something uncomfortable, something that lingers. You've learned that constant exposure, being available, always present, always performing, is not freedom, but captivity. It's not connection, but a tether that binds you to the demands of others. The more you give, the less you seem to have, and the more you sacrifice yourself in the name of others, the more you lose the essence of who you are. And yet, you've also seen the power that lies in stepping away, in choosing to disappear, if only for a moment. You've realized that absence, rather than a void, is a powerful form of presence. It's in the silence that the world begins to change. It's in the withdrawal that the self begins to re-emerge, no longer defined by the roles society forces upon us. You become free to explore the depths of your own existence, to confront your shadow, and to listen to your own truths. It's a paradox, isn't it? In a world that demands our constant attention, our ceaseless availability, we find that the true active connection is found in the sacred disappearance. Not a retreat into nothingness, but a return to something more real, more authentic, and more enduring than the fleeting validation of the world around us. And so, this is where we leave you. Not with a call to action in the traditional sense, not with a list of things you should do, but with a question and invitation to consider something deeper, something that lies beyond the surface of your daily life. What if your presence was never the gift? What if it was your absence all along? This may feel unsettling, perhaps even frightening. The idea that withdrawing, removing yourself from the incessant noise and demands of the world, could be a path to deeper connection, to true presence, seems counterintuitive. After all, how can absence be a gift? How can silence, solitude, and withdrawal create anything of value? But here lies the profound truth. When you stop giving away pieces of yourself, when you stop being constantly available, you start to rediscover the power that lies within. You reconnect with your own identity, your own essence, and you begin to create space for something far more meaningful than the hollow validation of external approval. Your absence is not a rejection of the world. It is a reclamation of your soul. When you disappear, the world does not forget you. It recalibrates. It reshapes itself around the new contours of your being. Your absence allows others to see you as you truly are, not a shadow of their expectations, but a fully realized self. You step out of the roles you've been playing, and in doing so, you become a person who is not bound by the constraints of others' demands. You create the space to redefine who you are and how you engage with the world. In this quiet disappearance, there is power, there is liberation, there is transformation. You are not defined by the frequency of your responses or the speed of your replies. You are not confined by the endless stream of demands that others place upon you. Your value does not lie in how often you show up, how much you give, or how much you perform. Your value lies in your ability to step back, to withdraw, and to allow yourself the space to become whole again, to reconnect with your true self, not the version of you that exists to fulfill others' expectations. And so, as we leave this journey behind, we challenge you to consider this truth. Your presence, in the end, was never the gift. Your absence was. For it is in your absence that the world will find new ways to engage with you, not as an object to be consumed, but as a being to be respected. It is in your absence that the world will begin to realize what you are truly worth. This is the sacred disappearance, and though it may feel unsettling now, perhaps, just perhaps, it's the beginning of something new, something deeper, something more real, a return to your true self. The world, in its infinite noise, will continue to churn, but in the stillness you create, in the absence you offer, you may find that you have become more connected than ever before. So, what now? What will you do with the space you've created? What will you discover when you stop answering every call, every message, every demand? Will you 2. Embrace the power of conscious absence. Only you can answer that.